or an aha moment where I'm like, this is not where the fun is. The fun is where these people keep finding it repeatedly, you know. And I think the other thing about the simplicity, we talk about the pizza all the time. I remember JW when we started doing this, and Kitty both were referencing the game as like it's just running from bouncing balls. So we have to make it compelling and satisfying. And thinking about that always got me in the proper mind frame for like outdoing myself to make this simple game not complicate itself, but totally deliver on the fact that it's like, you know, bouncing balls.
Yeah, no, you were talking about kind of the maximalist pizza, and what was cool about the design actually is that there are a lot of different disc types, but they're not complex. Like we realized with this core, you could make a fast disc or a big disc, and even that was already exciting and different enough to keep it very, like, a lot of the differences between the discs are very subtle. Like in the body area, for example, their speeds are irregular. Like the same type of disc might move at slightly different speeds, and that's all, right? And it still just bounces around.
And you have like the different mechanics and layers. Like in jungle, you have to stand in a circle, and like in the dark area, little spoilers.
Yeah.
But in the dark area, they're like chainsaws that behave differently.
Yeah, and like ghost discs that clip through the wall. But every disc design is very kind of basic. We didn't go far with that, so it just turned out to be really fertile ground for making a game.
I feel like there's a natural progress when you have like the goals for the doors. Initially, it was just time, and you're not gonna have every door be a time challenge. So you start building upon it, and the puzzles, the different mechanics start growing from that pretty naturally, just because you know you can't do the same thing for everyone.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we figured out that in hindsight is very obvious, and that if you play the game seems completely natural, but that was really hard to design, is the fact that you never walk through a door when gameplay is happening. Like you're always either dead or you've just defeated a boss, which happens like a few times only in the game. So it's like one of those things is how you maneuver the map is through death as well, and that was like the biggest click where we're like, okay, now it makes sense, because it still feels like an exploration game where you're walking through this giant spaceship, but actually there's kind of, it's almost more like selecting a level from a menu, right? And it has this weird semi-open world structure, and hopefully it feels like exploration, but you're not actually walking through doors most of the time. And those little things those are super hard to design, I think.
So this is a good jump off point, I think. Someone just said in hindsight it's all obvious. It is entirely not obvious to me, right? Because the overarching structure seems complicated and obfuscated in like a Dark Souls way. So it feels very much to me like I'm exploring and I don't really know if I'm in the right spot at the right time, right? Like it's unclear to me. Like sometimes I'm up against the Guardians, I think of what they're called. And I'm like, could I be unlocking something here to make this fight easier for myself? Because it's never clear to me, and I wasn't always clear on what the conditions were for opening specific doors. So none of that seemed, first of all, it seemed really mysterious to me, and I love it, because it definitely gives me a little bit of a mini Dark Souls feel. So I'm getting the exploration 100%, but making that, as you just said, JW, is not easy at all. So I feel like you all should elaborate on how that came together, because that is the part to me that departs very, very much from like the arcade minimalism that the individual rooms expose, right?
I feel like there's a very thin line between fun and frustration, and I feel like as long as you give people the opportunity to like pick between rooms and have the semi-open structure, it's
okay to get frustrated.
A little.
Yeah, totally. Like you don't want to back people against the wall, so we can either have really difficult rooms that are hard to beat or to get a time in, or we can have really difficult puzzles, and that is totally fine as long as you have somewhere else to go, right? You don't want to, what can you say, like cage the tiger or something? I don't know. I'm sure there's a saying in English, but you don't want to put the player up against the wall, because then they panic. You want to give them a way out always.
Wait, is Cage the Tiger a Dutch figure of speech? Is that thing you say?
Sure, yeah, now it is. No, but kind of what I mean is like you want to give them a way out. Like Kitty said, it's okay for them to be frustrated, both mentally or like skill-wise, as long as they've got something else to go.
And like, don't forget, there's also like still a story and a deeper layer for players to figure out. It's not just like
Yeah.
dodging this room.
And I think we're very generous with difficulty too. Like this room seems like a very difficult game, but the difficulty is not a narrow line. It's kind of a really wide spectrum with lots of optional, more difficult things, or ways to make it kind of easier, or multiple solutions to things. So,
And even if you're like, feel that it's too hard, we have like accessibility options that are like pretty good. Like even if you're good, you can play the game at like 200% speed.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I did see that, and I backed away from it instantaneously. But you're still okay. So I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper. You still make it sound easy, right? You're still making the sound like, oh yeah, you just designed so that people get confused, but not too confused. And it sounds like you're like know exactly what you're doing. But like, when did you start putting that part together? Is that something that came together only in 2020, or was that early on in the process and then you iterated on it to death, or what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
We just all talk a lot about things.
Yeah, and I think sometimes things just didn't work out, and then most of the time the solutions were like less is more, sort of saying goes. Like sometimes you just have to strip it down, and the basics were like better than like
Yeah.
this was cluttered.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
almost everything in the game was more complex at some point, I think.
Oh wow.
Like there used to be an energy bar for the special abilities that would recharge when discs spawn, and then we realized we could just hook that up to the timer and make it one system. Like that's often like when you come onto something that takes care of multiple problems in one solution, it's usually interesting game design.
That's the Miyamoto quote, right? Good solution solves multiple problems.
I think the only way when more is more, like more is also more, is like when you're designing like bosses.
Yeah.
You want to enter like a high note, and that's something that's, you know, needs to get your way through.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, we just had fun with the map, like everybody coming up with ideas for different goals we could do then, like once we realized that made it interesting. And then a lot of the balancing and kind of putting the map together was just our experience in a way, right? Like it's just testing and you know, trying to not corner the player. I think a lot of it felt a bit organic and natural, or we would come up with a fun little structure, like we can do a small section of the game that is more like kind of like a roguelike, to put it really dumbly, where like if you die you have to do the whole part over again. Like there's a bit, and then we put 4 levels in the game that do that, but it's optional, right? So we just filled it up.
Oh, when you do these games, or when I play all these amazing games that our peers make, sometimes I am. The second I start playing, I'm stressed about what I'm doing incorrectly, which is unknown to me. And Disc Room does a really great job of like alluding to the layers that are below and above how you enter and run from discs, but it also really just lets you be casual and replay a level instantly. There's the way that balance stayed throughout development was by
Yeah.
the second it broke disbelief or technically confused one of us, we just went in the back about it. And it's sort of, we just kept removing
Kept working
changes.
on it.
Yeah, I love how sometimes like one single room will become the whole game. It's like we're all friends and getting the best score.
Yeah.
Just that one room, and we don't even see
challenge.
much. Yeah.
Oh,
After PAX we added leaderboards, and it
that's a
definitely
bad idea. No, it's really fun.
Yeah, I got into it.
I wanted to ask about the leaderboards actually, because it seems so weird. It's like almost a little radical to have the sheer number of leaderboards that you have in this game.
Yeah, we ran into problems with the Switch. we were loading too many leaderboards, and apparently they have like a limit. So now on Switch you have to wait like a tiny bit longer for your leaderboard to load.
We also had a question from our listener, oh no, it's Nathan, who said, I'm very curious about it, what exactly the dev times are, which are shown on each room. Are they the best for the entire team? How many times do they record their score for each room? I think including that kind of challenge is really fun, especially for those of us that aren't good enough to be competitive on global leaderboards.
So the dev times are actually the 4 of us, whoever has like the highest score in like a particular level.
Yeah, we all just kind of played the game throughout development, kind of casually. I mean, we played a lot, but I never really played just one level to set a super high score. And then at the end, we just pulled them all in, and whoever was the best on the level put in. There's some of all of us spread throughout the game.
I think because we played pretty casually, they should be like pretty approachable. But to be honest, those is just a beast though.
Yeah, well, I noticed.
Yeah, they're mostly the.
Yeah, I like how the answer is kind of a stick burn on everyone, where you're like,
It's
well,
all
the
of
dev
us,
scores
but actually
were-
it's those.
I can't. This game and Gungeon are the two games that I've worked on that I found myself like, I'm not going to cook dinner. I'm going to order food and play this video game, And there was something about the flow state, and it all started with the challenge. And I was like, I can do 20 seconds. I just can't. And then I would drink a couple whiskeys, and I would just cross my eyes, and I would find God, man. And it was amazing. And there were a few rooms, and some nights I just was touched by Game Jesus, and I would go room to room and just beat my own scores. And then I see right away, the few streams I've watched, I see the clairvoyance of satisfaction they all have about how good they're going to be at this group. It's really awesome.
And there are some rooms where you get worse. Like the more you play, the worse you get.
True.
Which is weird.
Yeah, my favorite part is when you figure out new strategies with different abilities. Like there's a few of them where it's like, this level is super difficult, but actually there's a trick that is super not obvious and you can get way higher. So for the dev times, we took out what ability we used to get the score.
I noticed that. You mean person. Because I want
No
to say,
spoilers.
it's so cool that you see which, like for everyone except for the dev times, you see what the power up is, right? And you're like, that's
yeah.
how. Yeah.
But you don't want to give away the puzzles, right? It's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Just to jump in to explain to the listener. So you can equip one power at a time. So it might be something like dashing through a disc, or there's one power. Some of these are kind of spoilery, but one where you can absorb a disc that's near you, and so, but you can only have one equipped at each time. So there's a key strategic decision going into each room, which power is going to be useful for this room. And so that's what they were saying. I was really appreciating that JW because I have you on my like Steam list. I could see which powers you were using, and I was always like, oh, I see.
Well, you could see it, and you could see that JW's score is always under the dev team.
Yeah, almost always.
I also enjoyed having. I'm only friends with Andy on Steam right now, so it's pretty much like me versus Andy versus the devs, and so it was. Maybe Andy wasn't aware of this fight.
I was
but it was
not.
me. Yeah, exactly. It was
I
like
am
the
now.
one thing where I was.
Trust me, I am now.
Exactly. I'm just trying to like destroy your score and everything. I was like, as long as I decimate Andy, then I can move on.
We're good.
I have Dose's story reminded me of how this game has worked out for me. So I was alpha testing this, it was like a couple months ago or something, and I ended up getting pretty stuck on one of the bosses. I think I played like a long time that day, like a couple hours. I just couldn't do it. And then I put it down, and this semester's been really busy, so I didn't get back to it. But this week I started playing again in prep for the show. And it was weird. I like came back to it super fresh and just slammed out that boss like pretty quickly, and then kind of got through a lot of the game. So I think this is another game too. Like you were saying, you can actually start getting worse. If I find this is true of like Spelunky a little bit as well. So like I think there's something to be said for if you're gonna play this room. I think playing it kind of a little bit at a time, and if you're really like running into the literal and metaphorical buzzsaw, like put it down for a couple days and come back. You'll be
Yeah, if you start getting too pumped in a way, it gets harder. Like it is a game that can be intense at times, and it's really nice to play in short bursts. That's how I prefer playing it. But I think if you can zone out in a nice way, you can play longer.
I think you have to zone in, not out.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
You gotta see the
And
matrix.
I think a lot of that is actually the soundtrack. Like we thought a lot early on about just kind of the zone. We have to let people zone in, not zone out thing.
Yeah, I think for the music we definitely said no lounge music. get your gears going,
Yeah,
right?
it has that
throw
groove,
away
right?
all
It
that
has like a
lounge
good
music.
groove going on. You can get in. There's a lot of music system stuff that support that. And I always put the volume a bit louder than the default setting for the music. Like it really helps.
I wish this wasn't just a joke, because if there was actually like an outtakes lounge music from this, then I hope Dose would put this out as an EP on Bandcamp.
Yeah, it's all scat. And I do it in a Scorpion gaming chair. I think honestly, so JW said he was actually working on the final zone music. He was like, this one riff is making me zone out, not in. And I gave him props because I
I
was
think
like,
that was
wow.
Kitty who
Was it
said
Kitty who
that to
said
me,
that?
but
Okay.
it might have been
So,
my Slack.
no, it's and Kitty gets the crown because it was literally it is a heuristic I will never remove from my self-review process regarding how music should situate you in a game. And then this one was all about like flow state. And we decided really early on that nobody wants this realistic, the way Saws sound video game. Kill everyone. And so we pulled back on persistent saw loops.
So much, yeah.
Oh,
Bounce sounds that you could always hear was a really bad idea. We toned down a lot.
And I
Like,
think there are like really
Yeah.
cool tricks you guys did, but like the closer you come to like a saw blade, you hear it first, and then you kind of shake a little.
yeah, it's a lot of
There's
little
attenuation.
there. I think also my favorite thing about the music implementation is that when you die, the music cuts out, but the song keeps playing in the background, and then when you restart that level, it continues not where you died, but where you would be if you hadn't died. So the song just keeps going in your head. And same thing when you pause. Pause music fades in, and there's a lot of little things like that. And the game also remembers where a song was in a room. If you start playing another room and you go back, the song doesn't start again from the start. It just kind of, because we knew this was a game where someone might be playing the same room for an hour straight, trying to get a high score, and it needs to sound good. So the fact that those pulled that off and that the game supports it is one of the things that I'm really proud of.
and the best thing in the game musically, I'm just going to undercut
Tiny
everything,
apples,
is
tiny
abs-
apples.
it's the pause music. Like we put this, there's different, it's like 6 or 8 minute pieces that for every single zone, there's different pause music that is totally ambient and opposite of all the butt kicking music throughout. And it's kind of my favorite thing in the whole game every time it comes on.
Yeah, it's really chill. I also, yeah, like 50 said, the Tiny Apple song, it's just like the boss music, and it sounds like there's a Bible that just said tiny apples, tiny apples. And
So
I
good.
just love it so much. Yeah, but this game has like...